Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome, everyone. You're listening to Clarity from Chaos. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. If you're new to the show, please share it with a friend if you enjoy it. But before we get into this edition of Clarity, I'd like to share a few thoughts. When I formulated the name of this podcast several years ago, it was based on my views on how the corporate media spun lies concerning the political events of the day. Since those early days of the podcast, I've come to understand that the name of this podcast actually transcends that early view. What we really have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a spiritual battle going on in this country. And Clarity from Chaos is really God's light or his clarity on us to protect us from the evil chaos surrounding us. So with that, I would like to share a prayer before we move on. And this is from Matthew 9:29. To your faith be it to you. What God has ahead of you is greater than what is behind you. Don't go to bed stressing about it. Go to bed praying about it. Whatever's in your way, God will move it very soon, and you will smile and say, God, this is more than I prayed for. And if you believe it, don't forget to say amen and then pass that prayer on to somebody else to encourage them. Now, we are very pleased to welcome to the show the best-selling author of The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife, Mr. Kenneth Abramowitz. Kenneth is the managing general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital, a $450 million worldwide healthcare venture capital fund. He is also the founder of SaveTheWest.com. Welcome to the show, Ken.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So before we start diving into all the little parts and pieces of your book, I'd like your view on Trump's 20-point plan that he just outlined to try to put to bed the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas.
Well, there's good news and bad news. So let's start with the good news. The good news is that President Trump's trying to bring a resolution to a 2-year war, which is a noble attempt. President Trump does not like wars. He doesn't like when people get killed. He doesn't like blood. And he's very rational and logical about that. The bad news is in the Middle East, nothing's rational and logical. People have been fighting 1,400 years since Muhammad and his followers declared war on Western civilization. And they promised to kill all Christians, Jews, and Hindus. So although President Trump and Americans think that this is a 2-year war, it's a 1,400-year war, of which we're just looking at like a little snapshot of 2 years. So, but anyways, he basically wants to give Hamas an ultimatum, basically put down your guns, hand over the hostages over the next 3 days, and you can leave. You'll get amnesty, and drop your gun and go somewhere. So it's very logical. But now go to the bad news. The history of death cults is they don't surrender. We saw that in World War II. If you approached Hitler 2 weeks before the end of the war, it said, Mr. Hitler, just put down your guns and you can leave. Go to Antarctica. He'd say, no, I'm fighting till the end. And the same with the Japanese. And as you know, we had to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Japan to get them to put down their arms. So the history of death cults is they fight till the death. Now, if President Trump were here with us, he would say, I know that. What do you think? I was born yesterday, but I'm going to give them a chance. Who knows? Maybe they're different. Put down the guns and we'll have the hostages and end the fighting. But if they don't take the deal, then I'll tell the Israeli government they can order the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, to do whatever they have to do. So in that sense, President Trump is logical and rational in a Middle East that's not usually rational and logical.
Right. Well, Yeah, I think he gave them a little bit of breathing room, but I agree with you. I don't think they're going to take it, and I'm reluctant to say what's on my heart to think what's coming next, but I don't think it's going to be a very good thing. So probably the IDF is going to have to go in and go house to house and just clean it out. The problem that I see though, Kenneth, is the funding to Hamas is not there in Gaza. It's someplace else. And we're not dealing with that.
Well, I have an expression, I come out of the healthcare industry and for 45 years and simultaneously 25 years of national security. I do the two at the same time. And in the healthcare field, I'm not a doctor, but I monitor the business of healthcare. And I have an expression, everything's interrelated with everything, right? You can't just talk about your shoulder because
Right.
it's connected to the rest of your body and your elbow and whatnot. Well, similarly in national security, you can't just talk about one bad guy because behind the one bad guy, there's another bad guy, and then
Yeah,
another bad guy, and another bad guy. So,
exactly.
just as in healthcare, I followed the anatomy, but from the business point of view. I mean, doctors follow follow the anatomy from the medical point of view. Obviously, I looked at it from the business point of view. Well, now I spend half my time following the money and the guns in national security to see who are the bad guys, and then the worst guys, and then the even
Sure.
worse guys. And so that's what I do, and that's what I wrote in my book, The Multi-Front War. I analyzed that America's fighting 105 mini wars, or in a more simplified version, which I can explain to everybody, 21 mini wars, and everything's interrelated with everything. And so your
Right.
point's very well taken.
Yeah. Why do you think, just out of curiosity, I'd like your thoughts on the sudden rise in anti-Semitism, Kenneth, across the US. I don't remember growing up with it the way it is now, and I'm not sure if it's media driven or if it's bad actors behind the scenes driven. What are your thoughts?
All of the above. Keep going. So there's three groups of bad guys, which I color code: the reds, the greens, and the blues. The reds are color coded for the communists. That's traditional color for communists, and that's China, Russia, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, among others. And then there's the greens, color coded green for that's the color for Hamas, for example. But I'm not talking about Islam. I'm talking about Islamism. Islamism is now I have to step back for 30 seconds. Islam is both a religion and a political movement. As a religion, it's what individuals believe. As a political movement, the Islamists are trying to impose Islam on somebody else. So I call Islamism the enemy, not Islam the enemy. So the Islamists, that would be Qatar on the Sunni Muslims, 85% of Muslims, and Iran on the Shiites, the 15% of Muslims. And then the blues, color-coded blue for the United Nations color of their helmets, is the globalists. That's the UN, World Economic Forum, drug cartels, and social media companies. Now, to answer your question, these three groups of what I call criminal organizations all hate us. They hate the Constitution Bill of Rights. That's the secular law. They hate the religious law. We're a Judeo-Christian country, so they hate the Old Testament, they hate the New Testament. They hate Jews, they hate Christians. And while we're at it, they also hate Hindus. So the reds, the greens, and another differentiation between what I call normal people, us, is we believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody, using an American term. They believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for 10% of the people. Me, my family, and my friends, but not anyone listening in your audience.
Right.
The world revolves
Exactly.
around me, and I'm
Right.
the dictator. These dictatorships or criminal organizations, the reds, the greens, the blues, all hate the rule of law, and Jews are the personification of the rule of law because Jews introduced the Old Testament, the
The
Ten Commandments,
the original rule, right?
right,
Yeah.
3,300 years ago.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then the Christians, think of it like a relay race. The Christians then brought in the New Testament and the rule of law, still believing in the Old
Rule of
Testament.
law, right.
Right. And so what we think is normal, namely the rule of law, the 10 Commandments, for example, from a criminal's point of view, criminals hate the 10 Commandments. They don't want to be constrained by anything.
Right.
because they're criminals. So the point I'm getting to is they're purposely using anti-Semitism to destroy the Jews, but also to defame and slander the Jews, and indirectly slander the Christians. Phase two is then to go after the Christians.
Right.
But because the Jews are low-hanging fruit, people can't resist. You see, in America, Christians are roughly 90% of the population, and Jews are 2%. So it's pretty easy to go after the 2%, our nonviolent folks. You don't want to go after the 90% just yet. And so they're purposely orchestrating anti-Semitism throughout the world, the reds, the greens, and the blues, in order to, as I said, undermine the rule of law. And so they can basically take over and steal all the money because they're criminal organizations. And criminal organizations don't like to just stand up and say, look, I run a red, green, or blue criminal organization, and I like money, and you have money, so I'm going to steal your money, put it in my pocket, and I'm going to live happily ever after, and I don't really care what happens to you. Well, they don't usually say that. So they invent some reason why they deserve to have all the money. And so that's why they go after the Jews and the Christians. So just as a final point, I wrote an article on my website, Save the West, several months ago, saying that anti-Semitism may lead to the demise of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the Christians don't protect the Jews,
Yep.
it's the end of the Christians. And
No,
I'm not telling Christians to protect Jews. That's wonderful. But I want Christians to protect Jews in order to save Christians, because when the bad guys are finished with the Jews, they're going right after the Christians.
Oh, absolutely. And I think your point is lost, Ken, on a lot of Christians for that very reason. That they point to the crucifixion and tend to separate themselves because of it, right? Because the Jews, haven't that particular piece of Christianity. I think the differentiation is, and I think you're seeing it politically, right? The last administration was, quite frankly, and very blatantly anti-Jewish. I mean, they made no bones about being anti-Israel. No bones about it.
And I would argue they're also anti-Christian.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, quite frankly, the tragic death of Charlie Kirk has turned that Queen Mary a little bit back towards, you're seeing a lot more embracing of Christianity vocally than was seen before. And I think it's surprising a lot of people. I think it's caught a lot of people flat-footed that his death had such an impact from a religious standpoint. I mean, almost to the point of, I believe there was almost 100 million people that watched his memorial, which,
like a Super Bowl.
yeah, nobody would have believed that, right? Nobody would have believed it at all. So, okay, so let's shift. And you brought up the word globalist, which I'm glad you did, because I was going to bring up the recognition of Palestine, which to me is being driven by the globalists, is being driven by Europe, as a lever point in there. They say the two-state solution is absolutely required. I don't see how it's absolutely required, but I was curious on your thoughts about it.
Well, we all try to be rational and logical, but as I mentioned, in the Middle East, there's nothing rational and logical in the Middle East. So theoretically, you could argue that the Arabs who live in Judea and Samaria, which some people call the West Bank, or the Arabs who live in Gaza, who, by the way, I actually only been there for about 100 years, and they actually came from Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. They just moved into Israel as the Jews moved back in the late 1800s. And then there was work, and then the Arabs from those neighboring countries moved in. And the Jews were called the Palestinians until 1948.
Exactly.
And then in 1948, when the official state of Israel was announced and created, then the so-called Palestinian Jews instantly became Israeli Jews. And then it was in 1964 or so, the Russian KGB, secret police, invented the word Palestinian and applied it to the Arabs. It had never been applied to the Arabs before. It was always applied to the Jews. This is called, we call it identity theft. And they invented the so-called Palestinian people and said that they had to have a state. But the thesis behind the state was to destroy Israel. The thesis wasn't to set up a state in order to have a state for the so-called Palestinian Arabs. It was a state dedicated to destroying Israel. Now, in a logical world, the Arabs could have said, I want my state. I don't care if the Jews have their own state, that's fine too, but I want my own state for my people in my territory, but that never happened. And so that's why Palestinian movement, by definition, became a mortal threat to Israel. So here we are 60 years later. We had they didn't call it that, but Gaza was basically a Palestinian state. And they
Right.
took all the money and built weapons and tunnels. And then on October 7th, declared war on Israel and through genocide killed 1,200 Israelis. By the way, they would have killed all 10 million Israelis if they could have gotten away with it. They didn't get away with it. So that's why they can't be a Palestinian state, because the Arabs in the area have been miseducated for so long that they want a Palestinian state in order to destroy Israel. That's one issue. Secondly, the Arabs in the greater Middle East and the Turks, who are not Arabs, but they're Muslims, and the Iranians, who are Persians and they're not Muslims, they're Muslims but not Arabs, all of them now want the destruction of Israel. So you can't set up a Palestinian state for two reasons, because the internal people want to destroy Israel, and then the external
Right.
actors want to destroy Israel. You put the two together, and you can't allow it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a ticking bomb right in the middle of your country that they've set aside. And, over time, Israel has settled in a lot of the area. So I think they've broken it up a little bit, but I think part of the setback was Trump eliminating Iran's nuclear threat. I don't know that he completely eliminated the nuclear threat, because they've gone after Russia now to start building some nuclear power plants under the guise of Lord knows what. But I think in the interim, there was a message sent that we weren't going to tolerate that kind of stuff, right?
Well, the Iran-Israel war is not over.
No.
It's, to quote a Broadway play, it's an intermission.
Yeah, it will.
Between the first act and the second act.
Sure.
So within 12 months, Iran's going to be blown up again by Israel. America's not needed, because there's several things that have to be blown up in Iran that haven't been. First, all residual elements of their nuclear program and nuclear enrichment, whatever's left. That's number one. Number two, all of their long-range ballistic missiles and their drones, they have to be blown up. Number three, Iran's Air Force has to be blown up. Number four, Iran's Navy has to be blown up. Number five is supporting a worldwide terror organization. They have three separate terror organizations of about 600,000 worldwide terrorists. They have to close those three terror organizations. And number five, the government has to cease to exist and being replaced by human beings instead of monsters. So, well, that's a lot of things to ask of a certain country.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, and a lot of things that need to happen to have that happen.
Right.
So, that in itself will be a challenge. But I think I don't know. I don't know how much influence, you see a lot of press, Ken, from Trump in the Middle East, where Qatar and Jordan and Egypt and Saudi are all on the same page with this peace deal. I'm not really sure what the hell that means. It sounds like it's just a bunch of window dressing, quite frankly. I'm not sure how committed they really are to it.
Well, because there's a lot of details not included in the so-called peace plan, I think what's happening is every country is imagining their own peace plan.
Yeah.
So they use the 20 or so points and say, well, I believe in these, not those, sort of these. And then all the details behind it, they use their imagination. And so if there's an agreement, it's agreement because they're not all looking at the same peace plan.
Right. Yeah.
So they're picking and choosing, like at a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I was a little disappointed that Netanyahu apologized to Qatar for going after those Hamas generals. that disappointed me a little bit that he apologized, because Qatar has been harboring these guys for quite some time. And I think Israel was completely justified in going after them.
Well, I have an expression when I analyze issues like this. I say to myself, in a perfect world, what was the perfect response? And then I say to myself, but we don't live in a perfect world.
Yeah,
So
right,
what is the response?
right.
So now, in a perfect world, President Trump would have told Qatar to apologize to Israel
Exactly.
for harboring
Harboring Hamas. Yes.
Hamas death cult
Yes.
members
Yeah.
and promising to either put them in jail or to deport them.
Right.
They would have apologized to Israel. But again, we don't live in a perfect world. So Qatar has a gazillion dollars and Israel has billions of dollars, and gazillions are more than billions. And
Right.
so little Israel had to either apologize or express regret. As the prime minister said, he expressed regret that
Right.
some people were killed and they weren't the bad guys that they were looking for. In Israel, the prime minister publicly said that Qatar was not the target. It was Hamas was the target. So they sort of resolved it, but not in the perfect way. But
Right.
anyways, they resolved it.
Sure. So, yeah, okay. So we'll let that one go. So with your expertise, let's talk about Ukraine. What do you think's going to happen with that? Because I think there's a lot of kabuki theater going on, but I'm not sure if there's any real meaningful peace being talked about anywhere.
Well, first, I have a general expression that when you're dealing with bad guys, the reds, the greens, and the blues, there's no non-military solution to any problem you can think of.
Right.
You see, if you divide the world, just a 1-minute digression, the world is divided roughly 50% democracies, 50% dictatorships. The 50% that's democracy we call Western civilization, which is just a fancy word for democracy. And there, the will of the people theoretically is carried out more or less. And you can negotiate with democracies. You can argue, you can coerce, you have patent tariffs, you can threaten, but you don't threaten to blow somebody up. You threaten other ways. When you're dealing with dictatorships, everything's determined by the military. Now, not that you have to blow somebody up, but you have to have the ability to blow somebody up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if we're negotiating pretend with each other and you're part of a dictatorship and I say, you should do this and this and that, and you say, no, 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 no. I say, do you know that my Air Force is 100 times bigger than your Air Force? And if you keep saying, no, 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 I'm going to send my Air Force and blow up my big Air Force and blow up your little Air Force. Okay, fine. I'll negotiate.
Right.
You see what I mean? So it's either the use of military means or the threat of military means. So now going to your question of Ukraine, President Trump tried to be Mr. Nice Guy, tried to say to the world and to President Putin, look, we're friends, we like each other, let's work this out. Ironically, that ended up backfiring against Ukraine and against President Trump. Because from a dictator's point of view, if you play nice with me, then I go, good, I can run all over this guy. He's a wimp.
Right.
I don't have to worry. And President Trump inadvertently accelerated the Ukraine-Russia war, inadvertently encouraged Putin to attack more viciously, to attack more targets. Now Putin's actually targeting NATO targets in the Baltics and Poland, Moldova. And so President Trump made things worse. Now, if President Trump were on with us, he would say, yes, I inadvertently did that. I didn't think that would happen, but I can see why you would say that. And now I'm going to give Putin like a 6-week deadline in saying you will end the war or I will destroy your economy. I'm not going to blow you up. You don't blow up. America has 5,000 nuclear weapons and Russia has 6,000. You're not having a nuclear war with each other, okay? So you
No.
don't even have to think about that. And you can't threaten nuclear war or any war with a power like Russia. So all you can do is threaten economic war. So you can say, I'm going to force everybody, encourage and then force everybody to stop buying your oil and stop buying your natural gas.
Right.
I'm going to destroy your economy. Your economy is going to go in a free fall, and the people around you are going to take their little knives out and kill you. You don't say that publicly, and it'll be the end of your regime. Are you sure you want that, President Putin? And that's basically where we are right now.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Putin will come to his senses and stop the war.
Yeah, it disappointed me. I think Oban from Hungary said he wasn't going to participate in the sanctions against Russia and would continue to buy his energy products from Russia. But I think everybody else is starting to fall in line with
Well,
that.
the big issue is Turkey, India, and China. Now, America is so big and strong. I'm talking about economically right now. So big and strong that America, with enough pressure, can pressure Turkey, India, and China and secondary sanctions to destroy the Russian economy. President Trump does not want to do it because he wants America and Russia not to be friends and not to be allies, but to coexist.
Right.
Trump doesn't want to, and he shouldn't want to destroy the Soviet. Well, Reagan tried to destroy the Soviet Union, and it worked. President Trump does not want to destroy Russia. Remember, Russia's a Christian country. They should be within Western civilization. They shouldn't be 100% enemy and joining all the bad guys.
Right.
So I can see why President Trump is very reluctant to destroy the Russian economy and basically cause regime change. And hopefully, President Putin will come to his senses. But President Putin has another problem. He has the people inside the country. Remember, there is a reason that Russia is the largest country in the world, because for 1,000 years, they've been taking over other people's countries. So
Right.
you can't be a Russian czar, so to speak, and saying to the Russian people, okay, I'm happy. We have 11% of the world's land mass, and I think that's enough. We have plenty of land. I don't want anyone else's land. You have 1,000 years of history and tradition embodied in people and advisors and good guys and bad guys saying, what? We're not going to take over the world? And so Putin has to delicately balance not getting killed by his own people,
Right.
and solving the Ukraine war. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
Well, yeah, and
That's pretty
interestingly
challenging.
enough, I've always thought that Russia, since its border was against China, it might not be a bad idea to foster a relationship there because it tends to box China in a little bit.
Yes. Well, again, if President Trump were here, he would say, I don't want to destroy Russia. I want, not that I want to be friends. I want to get along with them
Right.
and trade with them just like a normal country.
Yeah.
And don't make me destroy Russia and destroy Putin. The next guy can be worse. And I'm going to give him every chance in the world to come into normalcy and resolve this amicably.
Right.
And so I can see why Trump's doing what he's doing. I can see why Putin's doing what he's doing. But push comes to shove, like in a month or two, because Trump has no patience for not
Right.
a lot of dead people fighting in a war that's stalemated.
No, I don't think so at all. So let's end this with your thoughts around the growing racial strife in this country. It amazes me that we continue to go backwards with this topic. We were making inroads across the board, and then all of a sudden, when Obama came into the presidency, everything changed again, and we've been going backwards ever since.
Okay, let me try to explain it. It's somewhat analogous to anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Okay, there's always a level of anti-Semitism. There's always a level of racism, but it's always, let's say, manageable. And America is the least anti-Semitic country in the world and the least racist country in the world. So it's not like everything's perfect and not like we all love each other, but we respect each other. We get along with each other and we work together and we play football together.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
okay, now let's go back to the bad guys. Pretend you're one of the Reds, Greens, or Blues. You're one of the communist countries, the Islamist countries, or the globalist organizations. And you say, Americans, Christians and Jews are getting along with each other. And blacks and whites are getting along with each other.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, OMG. We have to do something
Yeah,
about
we can't have that.
That's right. That's right. Because we want to take over America, steal all the money. And
Right. It's always about the Benjamins.
yeah. But we can't kill our way physically, kinetic war, to take over America. So let's undermine their culture. So let's get Christians and Jews to fight each other, not physically, but intellectually. And let's get blacks and whites to fight each other, either intellectually or physically. and let's create chaos in America. And as Abraham Lincoln famously said, if I have the quote correct, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And so let's help the house get divided among itself. Let's create a mini civil war, again, Jews and Christians, blacks and whites. And then we come rolling in intellectually, take over the country and steal the money. Now, let me digress for 1 minute. Sometimes when I have dinner with people, I say, you want to play a little mind game? They say, oh, yeah, great. I said, if you were a criminal and you wanted to steal something, and I told you you could steal one thing once, one day, and not go to jail, what would you steal? So most people say, I'll go to my local city bank. They have a vault there. I'm sure there's money in it. I'll rob the bank. And you said I can have all the money and I don't go to jail. I say, yeah, in this little game. And then I say to them, you can't do better than that? You just want that local branch? Then they, oh, I'll go to New York to the headquarters of Citibank. They must have a bigger vault with a lot of money. I'll steal that. And then I say, how about you can't do better than that? Then they go, how about Fort Knox? Can I bring a U-Haul to Fort Knox and steal all the gold? I say, well, in this mind game, yeah, you can do that. And I said, but you're missing the big issue. The big issue is if you were a master criminal and you were playing this little game that I'm playing, you would want the Bureau of Engraving because then you can print dollars and keep stealing them.
Oh, it sounds like the Fed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the point I'm getting to is the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues want the Bureau of Engraving. They don't want Citibank branches. They don't want Fort Knox, even though it has, I don't know, $1 trillion of gold. They want the Bureau of Engravings. And so that's why they ferment chaos within our country. Their fingerprints are all over the place so that we destroy ourselves, which is what I call cultural warfare.
Right, exactly. Well, we've been talking to Mr. Kenneth Abramowitz, and who's the author of the new book, The Multi-Front War, Defending America from Political Islam, China, Russia, Pandemics, and Racial Strife. That's enough on your plate right there. And where can people find your book?
Well, the two ways. They can obviously go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online websites like that. And the second way is just go to my website, savethewest.com. While they're there, they can sign up. There's a pop-up menu. I write an article every 2 weeks. It's complimentary. So they just sign up and they get my article. But on the website, there's a link to my book, to Amazon, and they can buy it for $25. And I tell people it's the biggest bargain book you'll ever buy because it only cost me $400 a book to produce. because people like me don't get paid for all the time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you added the blood, sweat, and tears, it's $400 book, and you only have to pay $25.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I think the audience probably got a real taste for what's going on, and will probably jump out and get the book to add to the knowledge that you've imparted tonight. So it's really been a pleasure, sir.
Pleasure to be with you anytime.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.